Hi, this is Raina Nisus, your host of a Season of Caring podcast, where we share stories of hope with family caregivers, pushing past the busyness and loneliness of caregiving to see God even in this season. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to our guest, Susie Lewis. Susie met Jesus when she was 12, but he set her free again when she was 33. She knows what it's like to ask yourself, why did I do that again? Using God's word literally in her speaking and writing, Susie inspires and educates women to break free from the bondage of the past and soar into victory with Jesus today. Her recently released book, The Great Trade: Exchanging Fear, Shame, and Guilt for Freedom, is a journey with Jesus at the center. Susie doesn't just offer you hope, she walks you right up to the throne room of grace and reminds you, you don't have to stay stuck. You can trade it all in for freedom. Welcome, Susie. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Raina.
So start off by just sharing a little bit about what your caregiving season looked like.
Well, it's been quite a minute since I was in that season. My mother passed away in 2003, and my father has been gone for about 6-7 years now. I don't even know the exact date. So it's been a while, but I did care for my mother in her home for the last 30 days of her life. She was diagnosed with lung cancer that had metastasized to her brain. And she wanted to be at home. She did not want to be in a facility. And so I moved in with her for a month and took care of her. And it's quite a different story with my dad, though. My father, who was quite a bit older than my mom, 11 years older than my mom, he outlived her by quite a few years. But my dad never learned to read or write. And so we cared for him while he was in his home. And then when he could no longer live by himself, he moved in and lived with my husband and I in our home for 4.5 years.
Wow. I love that your story shares some different sides of caregiving because no season looks the same. And even within each season, there are different needs. Like you said, being that caregiver that goes and just helps out in their house is totally different than having them live under your roof. So lots of great experiences, I'm sure, for you to share with us today. Start off by just sharing a favorite story.
Okay, I have a story about my mom that still just makes me smile, makes me cry. My mom always wanted me to learn to crochet, but I was more of a sports kid. I wanted to be outside playing ball. So sitting down to crochet was not my idea of fun. But in that last month with my mom, I learned to crochet. I bought a book that said I taught myself to crochet, and I did it right there on her couch. And she was so proud of me. And she was really into crocheting these baskets. And one day, I was actually taking my college courses still. I was a late starter in college, but I remember watching my mom. I was holding my textbook up in front of my face, and I could peek at her over the top of my book, and she was crocheting on her basket. She was advanced in her stage of cancer and the metastasis to the brain. As she was trying to pull her yarn through, I watched her pull the yarn through, repeatedly pull the yarn through. And finally I said, Mom, do you need some help? And she stopped and she looked down at herself, and she was literally in a pool of yellow yarn. It was all over her, all over the place. And she just looked at me and started laughing. And we just had the best laugh at my mom swimming in her yarn. I will say she finished that basket. It wasn't quite finished the way she would have been able to do sooner, but I still have that basket today, and it's a treasure for me to have that last project that she did.
I love that. That's such a beautiful memory, especially with the background of knowing that you kind of put her off when you were younger and didn't enjoy that with her at that time, but it really brought you together in such a special way at the end. It also reminds me of a great memory. My mom taught me to crochet. And those of you that have listened regularly know that I was just 16 when my mom was diagnosed. And so I think I was probably 11 or 12 when we all made our little granny circles and we made multiple Afghans to sit around with in the winter in Missouri in the cold. and snuggle up with. I saved those Afghans and I have them and they're like bright orange and brown and, just the popular colors from the 80s. And so that's some great memories. I love that. It's amazing how just finding those common hobbies can really be bonding with us as adults. Sometimes we forget to look for those common things, but we have so many great memories from that, being able to come back to it.
Definitely.
And I've not crocheted a basket before, so I'll have to check that
Well,
out.
I will say I have stuck with crocheting, and I have been able to crochet a baby blanket for all of my grandchildren, and there's a lot of them. We have 14 grands and another one on the way. So I just started another blanket last night. So and I do think my mom would be proud of me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that with us about her. I can just imagine what it was like to see all the yarn and probably not be sure what she was doing.
Right. I wasn't sure what her reaction would be because she knew that she was declining. So I wasn't sure when I said, Mom, do you need some help? It might be tears. It might be anger.
Right.
But thank the Lord we had such a good laugh together.
Yeah, what a blessing. And I think that's so true when we're trying to help with those that we're caring for, of sometimes how timid we can get with what to say and how to say it and how to navigate around that. And it's something that's worth really thinking before we speak so that we can walk into it with grace and hopefully get the reaction. No guarantees, that's for sure. So what would be one thing that surprised you most about caregiving?
I would probably say there were a couple of things. And I was younger. I was very, very healthy. But I will say I was very surprised at the toll, the physical toll that it took on me to take care of my mother. Obviously, the emotional toll is tremendous to watch your loved one decline day by day. But to physically help her out of her chair every time she had to go to the restroom until, that last week, when then it became me changing her. The humbleness that came into play, but especially the physical toll of the stress as well. I lost weight. That's how, and I didn't realize what stress I was under until the month was over. And I went back to my house and realized what I had just been through. And the other thing I was very surprised at was the resentment of other members of my family because I was able to be there with my mom and take care of her. There was some resentment. A statement was made by one of my family members who was at the doctor's office with me 1 month before my mom died. And then this family member showed up 1 week before mom died because she lives out of state. And I understood that she had to work. She could not be there. So she didn't see the daily decline like I did. She saw for 1 month and 3 weeks passed. And the statement was, Mom wasn't like this when I left. And there was quite a bit of pain. She was living in pain and probably regret that she couldn't be there. But, that saying, hurting people hurt people, and they really do. And so there was quite a bit of resentment that really surprised me. But I was blessed that I was able to be there to take care of my mom.
I think that brings out something that comes to mind is sometimes the communication can be really challenging, especially when I talk to those that I'm coaching that have siblings and the siblings don't seem to be interested or they don't step up when you ask for help. And I hear a lot, wow, they never respond or they never know. And I always encourage to invite them to participate and not have an expectation, but just say, I'm going to be gone or I need to go to this. Could you come and stay? Those invitations. But I do think it's important in the decline. For me, I lived 220 miles from my dad. And so I would, before he got to the point that he needed 24-hour care from my sister and I would go up once a month and spend the weekend with him. So I was seeing that decline, but there's times that, like you said, family members live a long way away. They only come for holidays and they just don't see that decline. And so it's surprising to them. that, oh my gosh, I knew such and such was happening, but I had no idea this is what it
Yeah.
was going to be
Yeah.
like. And sometimes just being able to make sure that they stay in contact can be helpful in that. It doesn't surprise me because it is shocking when we watch our loved one, when we walk them all the way
Yeah.
home. Both my mom and dad was a process. My mom was 6 weeks. My dad was probably 4, of just getting to that point. You knew because obviously it had metastasized, but many times you don't even know you're walking them to the
Right.
end. None of us know when the actual end is.
Right.
And so you're walking with them, but you don't know how long the walk will be.
That
So
is so true.
that
With my father, we thought so many times, this
Yes.
is it. He had a COPD, congestive heart failure, kidney failure. The fact he lived as long as he did is amazing because he was really so bad, did not take good care of his body. And my dad was an alcoholic. During my younger years, he quit drinking on August the 3rd of 1980. Maybe that's how he was able to survive as long as he did, but I cannot even tell you how many trips to the hospital and rehab, and we just knew it was the last time. But I will say, when the last time came, it was a shock. I just could not believe it because every time before he had come home with us.
I think that's one of the hardest things that it's likely are. I think, what do you mean? It is like both of my parents had such a long journey with Alzheimer's, that 14 years, and then you're just surprised that it's over. And so it sounds crazy. I think that happens for most of us.
I was so surprised. I just really didn't even comprehend what the physician said, that when he said, your father is in kidney failure. And so, okay, well, what are we going to do?
No, what's the plan? How are we turning this around? Yeah. So I know there are so many stories. Every time I ask this question, people are like, oh my gosh, share with us one time when God really showed up for you and your caregiving.
So caring for my father was probably some of the hardest years because of the traumatic childhood. I can tell you that I suffered almost every form of abuse at the hands of my father. And so when the time came for him to move into our house, I was so honored and excited that we would be able to do this for him. My husband was just so good and welcomed him. We made a special room for him in our house. He had his own room. But boy, I tell you, some things happened that were triggers. I didn't know that that's what it was. And one time, the day that the physical therapist came to visit after 21 days in the rehab facility, the physical therapist did a home visit. He said, now your father cannot be left alone. And what I heard was, you are trapped. You cannot go anywhere. And I had a mental breakdown that day. And 3 of my family members said, you need to get some help. You need to talk to someone. And I will say that began my first round of Christian counseling because I didn't know what was wrong with me. But what happened was that triggered times in my life where I had been physically trapped by my father against my will. But through all of those triggers, through all of those meltdowns, trying to figure out what is wrong with me, God brought into my life this Christian counselor. She actually endorsed my book for me. So she's seen me walk this walk. And it's just so amazing how God works. I'll just tell you, I'm a Southern Baptist preacher's wife. But at one time, I was also a Zumba instructor. So I don't know how that fits together, but it happened. And this woman, Karen, showed up at my 5 a.m. Zumba class one day. And she said, I just want to see what other kind of people are around at 5 a.m. dancing. And kind of find out, Karen is a licensed Christian counselor. And she came to my class every time we had it. And then when things began triggering, I was able to call her that day that the 3 family members said, you need help. And she was able to walk me through and to understand why I was acting the way I was acting. It was triggers from a childhood trauma. And I just believe God put that woman in my path to help me find healing through this very trying time in my life.
One of the things that I think is most amazing about God is how he weaves us all together. And that we would never have dreams that we were ever going to need what he's putting in our path at the time that they come into our lives. But those relationships are already there and those doors are open for us to walk through in just the right time. And so it's so amazing to me how he does that. And I'm just so thankful that he does that, because we sometimes would be too stubborn to do it. If you hadn't
Oh,
known her, how much harder would it have been to find someone, to make the phone call, to even start to work on what God wanted to heal in your life?
absolutely. Even before I called her, she had approached us to see about using a room in our church on 1 or 2 days a week where she could counsel people. And I had referred multiple people to her. And there she was. She was not a member of our church. She just used a room in our
Mm.
church for counseling. And it was just the perfect setup for me to be able to get help right when I needed it. And like you said, boy, to have to go look through the directory and filter through and find the
Yes.
right counselor. I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to have said, I just can't find the right
Mhm.
counselor. My first
Yeah,
shot was Karen.
it's amazing.
And I know God
Yeah.
put Karen in my path to help me through those years. And then I did end up having to go see her for another round, dealing with my brother, my younger brother, and some issues we had there. So,
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I appreciate too, and just being able to share your story with listeners, is that caregiving opened those doors that you didn't even know you needed to have opened in order to find freedom, that things that had been locked away and closed and you just had moved past, right? So many times that's what we do with our wounds, especially when we're young. We don't know what else to do with them. And so we just kind of lock them away and just don't walk by the
that
door.
is right.
And so caregiving opened those things up. And as hard as that was, as painful as it was, it still was such a blessing to restore a relationship with your dad that you probably had never had before, never dreamed you would have, in serving him in that way. But then also to move beyond even that time of caring for him and move into a season now where you're offering hope and freedom and helping other people to walk out what you've walked out.
I definitely believe that that time with my dad is a testimony of God's healing in my life. I had already begun my healing journey when I was 33. My pastor's wife, Debbie, she saw some things going on in me and she recognized some dysfunction. And she led me through a study called Making Peace with Your Past. And I share about that in my book. But that was my first inkling of dysfunction that I had inherited and was taking out on my children. And so she began my journey. But like you said, Raina, with my dad living in the house, it dug deeper. It took me to
Yeah.
a whole new level of healing that I needed to go through.
We say it all the time. I wouldn't choose it, but it is what God chose. And it's because he knows what we need and he is faithful. So I think that's probably one of the biggest summaries of is that we were this walk.
Wow.
It is what he has for us, and he has so much for us in it.
Yes.
So I'm thankful
Yes.
that we have opportunity to share that and encourage others. So what would be one thing that you do to live content, love well, and care without regrets?
Well, I do have regrets. We all have regrets, but I have regrets for the pre-care time. I wished I had been a better daughter to my parents. Sometimes I wish I could get a redo of even the caring time. Maybe I would have been more patient, especially with my dad. But I stayed. And I think that's a big thing. I stayed the course and
Mhm.
I honored my parents. Like the scripture says, honor your mother and your father. And I believe that the caregiving that I provided for my parents, even in the hard days and even in the days when I wasn't as kind as I should have been, I was committed. I stayed the course and I honored them till they passed. Yes.
Yeah. I think the consistency of just showing up is definitely one of the things I share, that I think that the definition of no regrets for me is growing and changing with it. that in each experience we have in life, we can either regret it and be sad and oftentimes get bitter and resentful, or we can take that to move and to grow and to change. And so when I think of regrets, that's exactly what you did, was you found a way to be able to, no matter where you were in your growth process, to do the best that you can do at that time. And there's a lot of freedom in realizing we're doing the best that we can. And as long as we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, Lord, I'm doing the best that I can, the best that I know, help me find the resources that I need, help me get the counseling if I need that, whatever it is, having that heart and that desire to do better than what we've done before, I think sets us up to be able to look back and be thankful.
Yeah. And I do think with both of my parents, well, like with my dad, the easier path would have definitely been to let him go and live in a nursing home, which sometimes my mother-in-law, who just passed in January, we had no other option. She had to live in a facility. We were not able to care for her needs. So I understand there are times when that is the only option. If I could have cared for her in our home, I would have. But with my dad, being in our home was an option. And so the fact that we did that, even on the hard days, it would have been so much easier to say, you know what, Dad, let's get you set up somewhere. But with my husband and, oh my goodness, his support, without him on board, I wouldn't have, there's no way we would have made it through there. Just being there and staying the course and knowing that what we're doing is honoring our parents, is honoring God as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I appreciate too, coming from a hard relationship, many times, again, as I'm coaching and as I'm talking to people in support groups, they have a difficult relationship with someone. They feel like, oh, there's just no way. And sometimes it's not healthy. Sometimes that relationship is so toxic that it's not healthy to be the one providing that care, but you can still facilitate care. You can still make sure that they're being cared for and that you're a part of as much of it as you can be. I love that you found that this was a catalyst to helping you heal and also healing that relationship. And so I do think there are times that can be, we haven't lived with our parents since we were little. And since they were totally in charge of everything, it changes everything. It really does change everything to be able to spend that amount of time with them. Even for me, as I was part-time with my dad, there's just so many opportunities to really engage at a different level when you're there all the time rather than coming and going. So let's end with our last question. What would be one thing that you wish you knew or that you would like to share with someone who's just starting their caregiving or even in the thick of the hard?
One is write it down. Write down those precious memories. I wish I had.
You think you will never forget, but it doesn't work that way, does it?
No, just like with our children, some of the things my children did, and now they'll talk about it and I'm like, oh, you don't remember that? Sure. I wish I had written it down for my children. Swore I was going to write these things down after spending that month with my mom. But, time fades our memories. And so I would say, if you have the privilege and the honor of getting to care for your parents, perhaps just a couple of sentences in a journal so you can remember and look back on the times that you have been gifted by God. I would just encourage you, if you have the privilege and the honor to be able to take care of your parents, to write down those precious memories. And that is something you can always go back and look at and remember with joy and a smile in your heart. And then the other one that really someone had to step into my life and say this to me. And I think today's self-care is like a little iffy topic. But boy, I tell you, I shared with you already, I lost a lot of weight from the stress. And a friend stopped by my mom's one day and she said, Susie, if you do not take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your mom. And so I just started taking enough time to just go for a walk. Now, I'm not saying that self-care is go hop in a bubble bath or go get your nails done. That's great. That's fine if that's your way. But it can be just going outside and spending 10 minutes outside, praying, singing, walking, but just a few minutes to allow yourself to breathe and find a way to take care of yourself, because caring for our loved ones who can't care for themselves is one of the hardest jobs we will ever be called to do. And we do have to take care of ourselves too in order to do it and do it well. So I would just encourage anyone listening to write it down and take care of yourself.
Such wisdom. And it's funny because those of us who have walked this path before you keep saying the same thing over and over again. I have 220 some odd episodes, and I sometimes feel like a broken record when I'm talking about self-care, but I am there with you, Susie. It is there will be nothing left of you if you don't figure out how to care for yourself. And there cannot be joy and happiness and fulfillment and all the things that God still has for the rest of your life if you don't take care of yourself. And so it is one of the most important things. It is not easy. It does not look the same for everyone, but you need to keep finding those ways that fill your spirit, that take care of you. And so thank you for that encouragement, because it is so true and it is so important. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today, Susie. It's been great to visit with you.
It was such a privilege, Raina. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for joining me today for Stories of Hope with Susie on a Season of Caring podcast, where there is hope to live content, love well, and care without regrets. If you have medical, financial, or legal questions, be sure to consult your local professionals and take heart in your season of caring.